Hello, everybody. My name is Asher, your host for the Revenue Journey podcast, where we interview and grab unique perspectives from amazing individuals doing technology sales within the APAC and ASEAN region. For those of you who are listening in for the first time, welcome to episode 2 of the podcast. For this episode, we have Clara, an account manager at TrendMicro. Now, I first connected with Clara through LinkedIn when I was still a university student, sharing about my sales internship experience on the platform. We connected, we had a simple coffee chat, and through the years, she became a really close friend of mine within the technology sales industry. So she's a great person to hang out with, and more importantly, she's here today as my very first guest to share about her journey getting into technology sales despite coming from a non-technical background. So with that being said, let's get this episode started. Hi Clara, welcome to the Revenue Journey podcast, and thank you for being the first ever guest on this show. So tell me, how are you feeling at this moment?
Wow, Asher, thank you so much for having me here. It's an honor, it's a pleasure, and most importantly, I'm actually really proud as a friend. For the uninitiated, so when we first met, actually probably in 2019, if I'm not wrong, end of the year, and Asher was just exploring journey into tech sales, connected on LinkedIn, and he did mention this is something that he was hoping to do sometime down the road, and here we are. Very first episode, being a guest. It's a true honor and pleasure here, Asher.
Yeah, and I have to say, Clara, the honor is mine as well. In fact, I'm just really happy that I can get this first episode started, you being my first guest. Because when you talk about how we met in 2019 and all that, I remember us having a lot of coffee chats, not just between the two of us, but with many people, with many different people within the technology sales industry. And we always talk about this whole idea of starting this podcast, right? And how we feel it will be beneficial if we have these conversations in the podcast. It can empower the community and motivate people in their career and journey. And most importantly, just to get different perspectives. And in my mind, I've always known that if I were to start a podcast, you will be my first guest. So once again, I'm really happy that you are part of this first episode.
Yeah, thanks, Asher. Really pumped up by your vision. I still remember you mentioned you read many sales books, very Western-centric, all from America. Nothing wrong with that. Just that, of course, as you rightly point out, it's quite different here in the Asian market, in the ASEAN region. Things are truly quite different. And I do see there's a great vision that you have behind this podcast. So yeah, here we are.
Yes, and of course, with that being said, I think it's also a good time for us to kind of jump into it, right? Yeah, so for one of the things that we want to do differently with this podcast is to really give our listeners more context. So for every guest that comes on, and today, Clara, you're the guest, we want you to actually share more information about the type of product you sell. For example, size of company that you sell to, industries that you sell to, personas you target, or even speak to on a daily or weekly basis. So we're going to start this off, right, Clara? Maybe you can start off by just, again, introducing yourself. I know I introduced you, but introduce yourself. Tell us what company you're working for, what products or services the company sell. These two things first.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so, I work for TrendMicro. It might sound familiar to some of you because, yes, that's right. We within the old days when it's just like B2C technology, it's an antivirus company that resides in your computers. Competing against familiar names like Symantec or Norton Virus. But of course, beyond that, TrendMicro actually does position cybersecurity solutions for businesses, and it's a very huge part of our business. So actually, I would say that it's a holistic vision that TrendMicro is going in for in terms of cybersecurity solutions. They're very known for network security, which is a big part of on-premise systems in organizations. We have also cloud security, which is something which I specialize in. So what I do here right now is to develop the business in terms of anything that builds up the pipeline of our cloud security solution to bring it to the market, be it enabling partners, working with cloud services providers, working with the field team to sort of be that, I'll say, a cloud security expert from a commercial perspective as well, and go to market, for the business here. So yeah.
Yeah, understand. And with that being said, then the next question is this, right? You talk about cloud security and all that. Typically, what are the types of companies to sell to? For example, what are their industry or verticals, as well as the typical sizes of these companies?
Okay, great question. Okay, in case my bosses are listening, I forgot to add, actually, we also gone now above and beyond to be a managed security solution provider, in the sense that this thing called XDR, a term that kind of analyzes things in context, be it collecting data from various sources to give insights to security personnel to kind of be proactive in hunting for threats within the environment here today. So speaking of that, actually, to be honest, here cybersecurity is needed in every industry. So we sell to all companies. So how we segment our industries here is by government patch, commercial patch, enterprise patch also includes financial service industry, the big players. So we really, really talk to anyone that really has contains IT data, runs IT operations, and that's a lot of companies. Can you imagine?
Right, I understand. And that means daily, would I be right to say you're pretty much just speaking to very technical people? That could be chief information officers, that could be CTOs, that could be IT managers, IT directors.
That's right. And to add that on, not just security anymore, but because now within the cloud space, there's roles like DevOps, cloud architects. So all these considerations of these personas are also as important to talk to today to position our solutions, for the benefit of the environment in the cloud.
Yeah, I understand. And I think for our listeners here, I think it's important to take note again, this is a technical product, it's cybersecurity. There's many different parts of it. And Clara today is speaking to a lot of technical people. I want you to keep that thought in mind because that will relate to the topic that we have here today, right? But before we go into that, we kind of want to set the ground, right? So Clara, in terms of background and careers, there are a couple of similarities between us. So one of the first few things is that we were both the only SDR or sales development representatives.
Yes, which is why we reached out to one another, right? Because both, I was doing ASEAN, I was on my own here. So yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So, we were the only sales development representatives within the ASEAN region in our first tech company. We both started out in SaaS, which is software as a service. We both graduated from SMU, Singapore Management University. But here's the key thing, and I think one of the main difference between us is that I came from a technical background. So for those of you who do not know, I have a diploma in mobile software development and a bachelor in information systems. And sometimes people will feel that for someone like me, it's not too surprising that I ended up in technology or technology sales. But for you, you came from a completely almost different background. You came from a background that was very non-technical. But today, as we mentioned earlier, you're selling a technical product to technical people. So maybe start off by sharing with us a little bit of your journey on what do you do in school and how do you make your way into technology sales?
Wow, Asher brings me back to the time 4 years ago, right? As if any other people in the last year of studies, especially picking a generally generic degree, business, well, the world is an oyster. You can go anywhere you want to. Many options for you out there. But anyway, the thing is that I realized that at that point I was sort of thinking of, I think actually sales at that time wasn't a widely spoken of kind of career aspiration by a lot of our peers in university, right?
Mm.
But I think it's just more of, and I know we all hear about financial advisors or, real estate agents as sales. So the thing is that from my end, I picked communications as a major because that's when I realized that, hey, going for internships, talking to peers, what we study in school does not directly translate to the hard skills that we will eventually have at work. So I wanted to pick something which will enhance my soft skills. And that's why I chose communication as a major and eventually interned at a media agency. So I think that's when I realized that, hey, actually, I'm not too bad at customer facing roles. And of course, for me at that point, one interesting thing that happened to me was a colleague just said, because for me, I wanted to have a conversion. It's always at any intern who likes a company and they want to get a full-time conversion, right? At the end of the internship. So she said, no, Clara, don't come back. I'm like, why? It's like, she said, okay, look at here, look at your peers, your supervisors working late hours. They're not getting paid a lot. And she gave me a breakdown of course, how much I'm going to earn. And it's not a nice figure. So I thought, okay, actually, I do have my school loans to pay for. So what's the fastest way to clear it off? So that's when I looked into sales. I mean, it is also a customer facing role. So I think from there, I get that really launched a kickstart. I didn't know it back then, but it really was the start of my sales journey. I wouldn't say it started when I was in the role itself, but before that, and this thing called networking. as you know, networking my way as a student. And I didn't know it back then. It's called a mentor platform, that we have in SMU. So I met Kevin. Shout out to Kevin. He's a great guy. Tremendous help given. And he really had that passion to journey with really young people to find their career aspirations, especially in tech sales. So it's always someone referring you to something good, and that's how we begin our journey. So that's when he told me that, hey, tech sales is something you can consider. I never thought of it before, honestly, like you said, because it's very tech, and I felt like I wasn't skilled enough to jump into that industry. But because he was also from a business degree, he said, okay, when you apply for a career, you got to have a certain direction and vision for yourself. And that's when I only applied to just tech sales roles strictly. So when I applied for these jobs, I probably only 10 of it, because I hear friends applying for over 20 or 50 job applications, right? But it can just cast the net out wide. But I was very specific in where I wanted, so that I can also convince myself that, hey, this is the place that I want to be at, and to be committed to that vision and idea, even though I'm not very sure about it at that point of time, whether I'll succeed, whether I'll like doing what I do, whether I'm good at it. So there's so many doubts at the start. I don't know if you can relate to that, but that was me back then. And now here I am.
So I'm really curious. You mentioned about how you wanted. I guess like what you mentioned, the first thing you wanted was more money, and I think universally people know that sales is a job where it's very commission based. I mean, sometimes in most sales jobs you have a base, some you don't even have a base, but it's purely about, okay, as much effort, the effort you put in, you sell the most things, you grab in the most revenue for the company, you earn a lot. But and this is the part that I'm curious about. So you talk about how you want to go into sales, you want to earn a lot of money. When was the point that you said tech sales is the way I want to go? Because again, you can do real estate, you can do many other types of sales. Is it because of your mentor, Kevin, or what other factors move you in that direction?
Well, to be frank, it's a mix of everything. Or I would say for me, I believe in I mean, things happen at the right time for you, right? For me at that time, I had a lot of peace in my heart. So I spoke to my mentor, I spoke to friends, and I also even observed, how what I do being an insurance agent. FYI, actually, I took an exam, and I had a certification for one of the insurance exam just in case I don't get my tech sales role. Yeah, but at the end of the day, it's about in my mind, I had my plan A was a tech sales. Plan B is more of, okay, what should I do? Should I just continue certifications and stuff? So at that point, it's really just exploring and walking into any open door. At that point, I mean, even though it's not something you should say in an interview, but it's more of you need a plan for yourself as well, right? So I think the moment I felt that hey, do I want to kind of in a sense, tap into my personal networks to sell a product, right? Even though it can be very fulfilling for some, and I agree that it can be very fulfilling to kind of advise financially to your friends and peers. But on the other hand, I do sometimes people want to keep things separate. So that was a main factor. And also I do see a lot of opportunities within the tech space as well. Like, because we all know the world around us is changing, and you look about technology, how it shapes organizations and people. So there's a lot more room to grow and to be done there. So that's where I felt it was more exciting to be in that space. And yet I get to be myself, my friends and family. I don't have to, play another persona in their lives, which I don't think it would gel well for me. Um, yeah, so I felt that was that turning point where I felt that actually it's very possible to also succeed in this capacity of the tech sales, and also having the upside to earn that money. Okay, I also a caveat that even though yes, every salesperson should say that money is a motivator, but I can honestly say money is really not my motivator. It's really for me, my personal growth and how I want to lead my life. You know, it was that kind of considerations I had, and I felt I didn't want to mix both together. So yeah.
Yeah, and I like the way you say it, right? In a sense that I think it's nice that you say that you kind of have a direction, you kind of have an idea in terms of where you want to go, and and that is why we're having this podcast, right? At the end of the day, it's just to give people more perspective into, hey, what's life like in technology sales. Again, you can go to many other different roles, but we both love tech sales for particular reasons, and that is why we are here to kind of share our little bit of journey. But I'm do curious as well, and follow up to the question. So, when I talk about tech sales, and there are sometimes people who are still in university, they ask me, hey, actually, I want to go into tech sales. I always ask them, tech sales is such a big word, the
Yeah,
word technology,
absolutely,
because out there,
absolutely.
yeah, and you have technology for so many different things, right? So, for example, you're selling technology, cybersecurity. You're selling to technical people. Sometimes could be things out there that are marketing technology. You use the technology to help marketers. Could be helping digital marketers. Could be helping people in PR. Could be helping different types of people. So, technology is such a big word. And sometimes, how I like to ask people, right? I like to ask students when they approach me, and I said, who do you want to have conversations with? Do you want to have conversations with marketers? Do you want to have conversations with IT people? Do you want to have conversations with people in data analytics, whatever that is? So my question to you is this, and if I can share, your first company was actually Dynatrace, right? You were SDR there. It was also a very technical product. So
Yes.
what made you decide to go there? I mean, like you said, you came from a communications background. You could have went into any other company that sold the technology for PR people, for communications people.
Yeah.
Again, why such a technical product? Yeah, I'm curious on that.
Okay. Very good question, Asher. But wow, that to put it very honestly and transparently, that was um one of the few roles which I had developments into the last round. Back then, I didn't have, like I said, I applied for 10 tech jobs only, tech sales job. But and obviously you can do the math, right? How many would I have to reach to the end? Probably like a few, one or two. One great compelling factor is because Kevin, my mentor, right? He actually referred me in. So very interestingly, the thing is that no, when I met him, he had no agenda at all. There wasn't any opening in the company. But because we sustained that mentor and mentee relationship, and he's also very invested in that journey, and I guess I also showed probably that curiosity, and I fought hard to kind of also to demonstrate that I really wanted to learn and learn from him. Like the thing is that he got actually the thing is that before I got this job in itself, it only came out like 6 months later, and just nice he knew me. He actually got me to meet the team in a conference first. It's an AWS conference, I remember back then. So I think from there, it gave me a better understanding of the product in itself first. To be fair, I still, at that point, even in the interview itself, I really do not know what the product does. It's so technical. But I think sometimes, in life, you just need people to take a chance on you. And I
Yep.
remember that I was up against another more experienced person who have a sales background. And I felt I didn't do well for the interview. And I think that's when, depending on your beliefs or your North Star or guidance, I felt, okay, if I get this role, then that's it, it's saying, God's will for me, So yeah. And I just got an offer like on that week itself, because I really didn't think I did very well. But of course I had a great chat with the team, interviewing me back then, giving me advice, telling me that it's not all about the pitch, just debunked my head about sales with all things the elevator pitch. But it's never the elevator pitch that sells the product. It's always how do we connect the customers, and they're telling me that I should ask more questions during my pitch. I should have given more pause, checked in with them. It's all about the interactions. I think knowing this people that I'll come into work with eventually was really something that sealed the game for me. And because they all didn't mind that I didn't know about the product at all. We all think that you need to have 100%. It's like, I guess it's a school curriculum thing, right? You give like exams, you need to learn, then out of 100%, how much do we get it right? But it's not the case in the real world. And that was like the first encounter I felt that these people took a chance on me, right? They saw something in me that felt that I could be a good fit for the role. And someone is the very first role in the ASEAN region. So for that, how could I say no to that, right?
Yeah, and I really love what you talk about, this whole idea of having a genuine sort of connection, right? You talked about how when you go into an interview, they said, hey, you should ask more questions. You talked about how you really vibe with the people that you're potentially going to be working with. You had a relationship with, your mentors and all of that. And I think it really reminds me of this is really how sales is, right? I mean, we haven't really been doing sales for a long time, but it doesn't take you too long to realize that at the end of the day, it's a human to human relationship thing, which is why I guess to them it wasn't too important that you didn't know about the product, because they liked the way you kind of handled the interaction with them, and that pretty much sealed the deal. So yeah.
Possibly, yeah, correct. Because I realized that you see, right? I think it's the same today as well. I also learning this same lesson. I remember in an interview back then, we all always think, okay, there's a main agenda in mind. You want to close the sale, you want to close the interview, you want to get a job, right? But at that time, when I had that valuable connection with these people, I think something good about it is that you no longer feel that you walk away thinking that, okay, yeah, I've gained from this, even though I haven't had my outcome out yet. I may or may not get a job, but if you're always feeling that you've gained a lot of valuable insights and knowledge from the conversation, it's a win in itself, because these relationships do extend beyond just your job, because a job is a very transactional thing, but relationships itself, it's something that you can't put a value to it, lah. Basically, this is what it is. There's many value that can be extracted, from future opportunities, future interactions. So that's why, that's where I learned that you can never put sales is actually really a transactional thing, especially in this space. Yes, I mean it is in the values, your pipeline, you do need to get all that, but at the end of the day, it helped me to see the bigger picture lah, of being in sales, and that's where I felt that where my heart was leading me towards lah. And the monetary benefits is just like a plus thing. Like money will follow, as they say. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, like you mentioned, this is actually one of the biggest things I realized when, as I mentioned in my first episode, right? I told people that I read 5 sales books right before I came out of university, and they were all teaching me about how to do sales, and I was watching a lot of videos online. But I realized the main difference really in ASEAN versus US is, I mean, in everywhere, relationships are important, right? You got to have
Yep.
relationships, and people are more compelled to listen to you. But so much so in ASEAN, and especially in like the developing countries, you have countries like Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam. If you don't speak their language, for one, it's so hard to sell to them, because you need to speak their local language to be able to even
And having that FaceTime with them, the physical face-to-face interactions. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you touched on that very important topic. So thank you so much for sharing that. But now we want to again backtrack, right? We went into what you're doing now. But if we were to take a bit of backtrack, you got a job, you went to tech sales. Tell us a little bit about your first few weeks, how you got started. And obviously we all know your role as a sales development representative, which typically is the first role you do, the first tech sales role you do when you want to go into tech sales. You have targets. And so tell us a little bit about, for some of our listeners who may not be familiar with technology sales, tell us what those KPIs are, what you did in your first few days or first few weeks. How do you get started? How do you get the engine going?
Got it. So I think first things first, right? Every company has different processes to onboard like new hires. So I think naturally for fresh grad, we naturally hope for a more structured way to onboard. Like there's a proven track record that the company is experienced in doing so, and it's very obvious which companies are, right? But for mine, it was a first job in the region, and actually back in the Singapore office, and it's actually the ASEAN office, right? For to sell to the other countries in ASEAN, there were just about like 30 of us, with just probably about a few salespeople covering ASEAN market. So that's why naturally the kind of experience I had also was very different. It was also in a very small rented area. It looks like a shoebox, honestly. Okay, but now it's upgraded already. It's a much nicer office. So I think I had really a lot of on the ground support. In a sense, it wasn't really a structured program. Okay, though actually the main part of it is that there was a boot camp that I could have that was assigned for me, but it was like 1 month later to the US for 1 week to enable myself to learn about the product, the demo, the formal stuff. But for the first 1 month, it's really just on the ground support. So I was scheduled to a lot of one-on-one conversations with colleagues to go through a very high-level details of a product operation matters, Salesforce CRM, handling inbound requests, talking to also my counterparts in Australia. So actually, I'm the first of ASEAN, but there's also already some sales development rep or SDRs based there as well. So for me, it really, really, I guess, it was great because they weren't really very hard on KPIs. I guess this is the benefit of being in a smaller pre-IPO company. So yeah, just to caveat, Direct Trace is not back then was a private company. It was just beginning to IPO. Actually, IPO'd a year later when I was in. So that's why before that, it was actually a lot more forgiving in the sense they're they're not too hard on the KPIs, but they prioritize more of, okay, how do we get this started for you? How do you fit into this ecosystem right now? Because you're the first hire in the region, so you got to find a way to work within the system and make sure that there's a well-oiled process for it. So yeah, I felt that I had a privilege of really just easing into the culture first rather than being tagged to KPIs and programs.
Understood. So really, you said your first few weeks was really about understanding the company's culture, and I'm sure your company had a lot of sort of onboarding materials for you to look at and to really
Oh, absolutely,
understand.
yeah. Very great enablement. Global did a great job. the IHS globally did a great job to enable people. They have programs in place and slides and decks beautifully done.
Yeah, and I think it's actually quite common for most companies, right? Especially companies who are, born in the US, they started there, and most of them want to expand into APAC. And when they expand to APAC, they probably already have all of these materials, really structured onboarding materials. And that's why I always tell people it doesn't really matter if you don't have much knowledge about that particular industry, or if you don't have much knowledge of that particular product or services. Of course, during the interview, it's always good for you to, before that, read up a little bit, so you can ace the interview, right? They want people who do their research. They want candidates who are willing to put in more effort. Mm.
Yeah, exactly. And also to not be afraid of trying. So I remember within the first 2 weeks, I was really made to kind of handle an inbound requests. To just jump into it and just have a conversation. Even though I remember I made a lot of mistakes actually. Like for example, okay, I think just to give a bit of context, because the Dynatrace sells to people who manage the infrastructure. Actually, no, not really infrastructure, who develops code actually, right? There's different coding languages that people use, like Python, Java. So that's one of the qualifying questions because you need to assess whether a product could kind of support that language, right? So the thing is that tech, there's so many different roles, different capabilities. So I was talking to this guy who covers infrastructure. Infrastructure is not a guy who codes, basically. You just have to know that. So I just really asked this question, like ask, oh, what code language do you use? So you see, I made mistakes like that. But the thing is that if you never try, you never know. And that's when I realized that hey, I can make a mistake on that day. So it's also about just jumping in to try, like trial and error. Lots of that actually. Many of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and this is the same thing, right? I always tell my friends that you can have all the onboarding materials in the world, you can have all the text or all the videos, training videos that you have, but you never really learn as much as compared to just getting your feet wet.
Doing
Fa-
it.
yeah,
Exactly.
and just
Exactly.
failing fast, right? But I'm really curious. Obviously you talk about the whole onboarding period, and as a SDR, as we mentioned, you have your KPIs, and for many people who have not done sales, this can be a little bit overwhelming. This can be a little bit scary. It can be a bit nervous. What are some of the things that you did to make sure you hit your quota? And for our listeners out there, Clara is actually a President's Club winner. Okay, so if you don't know what is a President's Club, right, it's basically an award given to top performers. And for her, she's the sales development representative for ASEAN. She was actually the top performer globally. Am I right? It was globally.
Oh no, APAC, APAC. It was APAC.
Yeah, it's still big. APAC is still a big region. So you actually did so well, and you've never sold a technical product before. You were new to technology. You had a non-technical background. So we really want to know, what do you do? How do you structure your day, or how do you get started, and how do you make sure that you're consistently getting those quota in, and of course earning your money and feeling good at the same time.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. I would say actually a lot of credit is given no, not just on my own KPIs, but I'll talk about KPIs first. Yeah. So actually I got this award in my second year as a SDR, not the first year, because first year is in a sense I was still onboarding, I was still ramping up. So I got it in 2020, for this award. But I remember that back then I had to really structure my own days. So which also includes having I remember back then I had my own Excel schedule for myself. So I mean, I have Excel sheet. So I didn't know. Okay, back then because I was still learning how to use the Outlook, right? I guess today can use Outlook to kind of like schedule calendars in now. But back then I was using Excel sheets, and I have a day to day process to okay. I have a chunk to block out calls in certain periods. So it's always a test and trial in the initial stage. So it's about testing a market to see okay which parts of the days would people are likely to respond to a call. And I also make sure that I use a lot of enablement tools as well because I think Dynatrace, the good thing is that they have a lot of tools readily available like Zoom Info to get contacts. I was using Salesloft, which is email automation as well, and trying to identify tasks that could be automated because eventually you see some patterns. You got to identify these patterns that you can automate, like let's say free trials. So there's always a certain behavior of free trial, people on a free trial, and certain things to say as well to engage these people. And knowing that also free trial is like also the low hanging fruits. So you got to really prioritize on these metrics and engagements at the start. Um, and also it's important to have certain goals for the month. Okay, because for me I was measured quarterly actually. So because I was positioning the product for enterprises, Dynatrace is positioned for enterprises. So it's really having also a good relationship with your account executive. Actually, I cannot emphasize this enough. It's having that, because to some extent, as a SDR, you are working as a same in the same team with your account executives. A lot of times, I would say, to actually put it very honestly, and I don't know if it's just unique to my situation, but it depends also on your luck to some extent. Whether you get a lot of inbound requests, whether there's a certain industry that suddenly have an influx of requirements, and you just have to know how to capture all these information and these people at the right time. Then from there, yeah, you're able to kind of validate opportunity, and there's our KPI, validating opportunity, making sure that these opportunities progress to a stage called proof of concept. So basically, it's just like, for example, you're buying a car today, and then if a prospect actually sits on the car to test it out, that shows a level of commitment as well to kind of try out things and to evaluate. So our job as an SDR is to just get them to the test drive stage. So I'm not so sure. Okay, I mean, actually, feel free to guide me back to probably your question, but yeah, this is the main thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I know, Clara, you were trying also not to get too technical in because there may be some listeners who are new. But I think I like what you mentioned, right? Basically, one of the things you mentioned is at the end of the day, the sales development role, you are in the lead generation role. You are trying to get leads, and most importantly is it's also a numbers game.
Yes.
So for example, that
Yes.
I always tell people this, right? It's a numbers game. Let's say that for every 100 emails you send out, you will get 5 response, and out of those 5 response, one will be willing to talk to you. Then if let's say your target is 10 a month, then you got to send out 1,000 emails. It's a math game. So that was one of the things you mentioned, how you structure your day. You make sure that you have an Excel sheet to keep track of your activities. And I think number 2, it's also about finding patterns. And in sales, actually it's all human psychology, right? You think about when a person wants to buy something, they want to buy a software, they want to buy any other product, they will go into review site, they will go in online to search for it, and you kind of use all these different triggers to try to say, okay, it seems like this person may be looking to buy. This person has attended our event, has downloaded this content.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, correct. Because there's always a repository of data to tell you, is this a hot lead? I mean, there's sometimes, actually, to be fair, there's some inaccuracies, but largely you can use it as a kind of gauge for yourself to prioritize and to just give a quick call. Yeah, just basically getting ways to reach out. Okay, actually, the hardest part of being an SDR actually is getting a response. I cannot tell you how happy I am when I see an email back. Usually people don't want an email in the inbox, right? But for SDR, if you see an email in your inbox from a customer or prospect, oh my gosh, it feels good. Okay, even might be a rejection as well sometimes, but it's better than no response. I think this is the job of SDRs, I feel, also.
Yeah, it's more of like getting the acknowledgement from someone, and you feel like, okay, I won something. Yeah, I got the response. I managed to get this person curious enough or intrigued enough to respond to me.
Exactly. It takes effort actually, for people to respond to someone like an SDR. I mean, not. I guess that's a reality of being an SDR sometimes. Like, there's so many people reaching out to this same person, but the fact that if that someone responds to you, you just feel a bit more validated as well in your work. So,
Yeah, and I totally agree that with you because we've all been in that shoes, and I'm still in that shoe. So yeah, and of course, if just to summarize today's episode, right? As we mentioned just now, we talk about how being an SDI, if you want to succeed, you got to make sure that you plan your time carefully, and you got to find triggers, find and learn from others, right? Find how people are succeeding. In a sense, copy their ways, copy their methods, copy the way they do things, and of course, more importantly, we talk about how it was really relationships, the courage to try out different things and just do your best.
yep.
And that actually got you into tech sales today, and you're still in that role. So this was definitely quite interesting episode. I mean, for the first one, I think we are definitely looking forward to in the future.
Hope you're just warming the seat. I'm just warming the stage right now. I'm sure there's a lot more great content that you can dive into. Actually, a lot of topics we talk about, like, let's say, even ways to reach out to someone in a world that is saturated with information as well. What makes someone respond to you? There's so many topics you can dive into actually for this. So I'm looking forward to seeing other content that you have as well in the other episodes.
Yeah, and I think those are definitely things that we can dive deeper into in the future episodes, either with other guests or maybe possibly I can be the one just to share a little bit more context before every episode to help people better understand the role. So when they go into episode, maybe they have more ideas. But with that being said, Clara, I just want to thank you so much for sharing and again being for our first guest. But it seems like our time is almost up. But before I go, I have a couple of questions for you. So try your best to answer them within one sentence or one phrase. You ready?
Okay. Let's go. Let's go.
Okay, so based on today's topic, what do you have to say to people who are seriously considering a career in technology sales, regardless of their background? What would you say to them?
Okay, seriously, talk to people, reach out to people who in the role. You got to be the one initiating it and ensure that you have questions to ask.
Okay, very good. So second question is, what do you love about your job at the moment?
Definitely the relationships built, like just being more aware of what motivates someone, what makes someone tick.
Yeah, I think you also mentioned that as you were asking the first question. So definitely relationships is one thing. And of course, last but not least, sales is sometimes it's really a job that requires a lot of motivation. So tell me, what gets you out of bed every day?
Knowing that I could be there to solve someone's problems. That's it.
Nice. I love it. Short and sweet. Now, I just have a few more rapid fire questions. And as you know, rapid fire questions means try to answer with one word or as fast as possible. Okay, so I have a couple.
Wow. Okay, let's do this.
Yeah, so just try your best to answer as quickly as possible and then we move on down to the questions. So, number one, do you prefer coffee or tea?
Coffee. Oh my gosh. Sales made me love coffee now. Feel for the day.
All right, second question, when are you the most productive?
Oh, definitely at night. I'm a night person.
Same here too. Okay, number three, what's something that you do not like doing?
Calling people. Oh my gosh. Just that. Not that I love calling people now, but I'm very used to it. I mean, I'm not scared of it anymore, but still calling people.
Right, like calling up a stranger and trying to get them to talk to you.
Colleagues, I love talking to colleagues, right? But or people who I know. But strangers,
Yeah, and nobody, I think not a lot of people will love it, but we know it's necessary sometimes.
Exactly. Necessary evil.
Okay, next one. What's your favorite dessert?
Oh my gosh, tiramisu, hands down.
Tiramisu. Okay, so next question? What's the first thing you notice about someone when you first meet them?
I'll notice about how they shake their hands.
Oh, okay. Wow. When you meet them face to face and how they...
Face to face. Yeah, I mean, okay, before that, sorry, how they walk actually. How they walk and look at you. That's important to me.
Right, basically how they carry themselves.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the best compliment you've ever gotten from someone?
You speak really well. Yes.
Oh, okay. Nice. And today you're on this podcast. I thank you for it. We're coming to the end. Okay, last question. What advice would you give to your younger self?
Oh my gosh, wow. I think a lot of it is have confidence in yourself. Have confidence in your value, because I think for me, I'm someone who actually doubts a lot about myself. I've always seek affirmation from others. But I think at the end of the day, it's looking at yourself from a third party's perspective to see and to be proud of what you've done so far. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Now, Clara, with that being said, for our listeners who are tuning in, maybe them hearing you today, they may be a little bit curious and want to know a little bit more. What is the best way they can reach you?
Definitely through LinkedIn. Of course, to say how you came to know me through Asher Chua, Revenue Journey Podcast. So if this is all of the ways that they came through, it would be great if they can just give a shout out on that. And yeah, actually LinkedIn is right now is even better than the phone number of a salesperson. We give away like flyers right now, like our LinkedIn links to get people to get in touch. It's a great way to connect.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, that's how we connected, right? And don't worry, I will make sure I put your account link or rather your profile link part of this episode's description. So with that being said, thank you so much, Clara, once again for being my very first guest of the Revenue Journey podcast.
True honor. Yeah, I'm so excited for you on this journey and looking forward to hear from you more.
Yes, of course, looking for more episodes to come. And more importantly, thank you everyone for tuning in as well. Now, if you enjoyed this episode and you want to hear more, hit the subscribe button. Once again, my name is Asher. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn by typing in Asher Chua, that is ASHERCHUA, or click on my profile link in this episode description. As always, I'm new to hosting my own podcast and I will appreciate any feedback you may have. And if you have any suggestions or any particular topic on who I should bring on next, please let me know via LinkedIn. As always, I'm excited for the next one. Looking forward to it. But for now, take care, stay safe, and have a great revenue journey. And Clara, say bye to our listeners.
Bye everyone. See you next episode.